we've talked about the organized crime that's happening, the money laundering that's happening. We're seeing it in a variety of port communities and port cities around the country. What is the appetite in the current Conservative caucus for implementing and bringing in racketeering laws in this country to start taking down some of these criminal organizations?
Oh, I think we're in desperate need. We don't have racketeering laws in that way. We've got they have very strong racketeering laws in the United States. We don't have them here. Those laws need to be added, along with actually restoring the issue that you don't get to commit crimes for free. If you're a multiple offender time after time after time, especially a violent crime, you're not going to get bail. And I know the courts have said that that's unconstitutional, but we've said, that's the one area where we're going to override the courts with the notwithstanding clauses to make sure that people are safe and that we can provide proper sentencing for violent criminals and keep them in jail. There's one thing that's guaranteed is that when a criminal's in jail, they aren't going to commit a crime against you. Yeah. And so we need to find and use the tools the federal government has to do that. Stronger sentences. We've talked about if you're, Pierre has announced that basically if you're making and marketing fentanyl, you're essentially a murderer because that's the ultimate result of people's addiction to fentanyl. And doesn't take much to kill an individual. So you're going to be charged and have sentences like a murderer, and you're not going to be able to go out and get out and bail in the next 24 hours if you're doing that kind of crime. So, and racketeering is a big part of that because we've got these organized crime units. So you need to have stronger penalties and stronger tools for police to be able to investigate and pursue these.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that I've heard in conversations with police. And I will admit, at one point in time, I was just like, oh yeah, police are terrible. Like, we need to get rid of them. And I think that was probably after quite a few speeding tickets, maybe. But yeah, so one of the conversations that actually, when you sit down and listen to somebody who is a police officer and who serves the public in that way, is really just the fact that they're demoralized. They're like, we will go out into a community, spend as much time. We have a very large historic Black community, as you know, in Nova Scotia. They will go into that community, work with that community, and then catch the person who is actively harming that community by indoctrinating young men or getting them to, or trafficking young women. They'll actually catch the person with the drugs on them and the firearms, everything. And then that person will come out on bail and be gone. Right. Nowhere to be found. Right. And they said, we just watch it happen over and over again to the point where we're just like, why do we even bother? So,
well, especially when you're putting your life on the line when you're doing those kinds of things. And we've seen this with, again, with the illegal fishery that's been in the news here where people are going across private land and spending months and months at midnight to 6 a.m. on somebody's land fishing these baby eels that are $5,000 a kilogram. And they're armed. In a lot of cases, these are armed on people on the property. When you call the police, they're like, well, it's a $500 maximum fine for trespassing, and we arrest them. They're out. It's not much of an offense. And we've got other things going on and limited resources. So that kind of crime continues, right? And they have limited resources. And so they have to prioritize like everybody else does at a business, where you're going to spend your time. So if they've got calls at night for assaults and that kind of thing, they're not coming to a potential trespassing thing where somebody is armed. So we've got to have the tools for the police, but they also get dispirited. We've had issues where they're like, these guys get out on bail. Why am I actually going to go risk my life?
Exactly.
Other than my desire to keep my community safe and to keep people safe. But I think we get very complacent about that.
Yeah, and you said you mentioned using the notwithstanding clause because of the charter obviously being used and weaponized for the benefit of these criminals. But why is it coming down to the point where you have to use the notwithstanding clause? Why is it that you cannot work with the judiciary to actually create those laws and have them
do some
go
carve-outs?
through? Is it just, sorry?
Like carve-outs for the charter type of thing, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's a great question. Don't ask me to explain how the Supreme Court actually makes some of its decisions, right? Unlike the U.S. Supreme Court, in our system, they don't actually reverse decisions in subsequent cases. They can narrow it. So we have a Supreme Court ruling that said that, serving sentences one after the other, if you're a multiple murderer and you get 3 life sentences, that you have to serve them concurrently, because serving one after the other is cruel and unusual punishment,
I
which
hate
is crazy.
that so much.
We don't want to get wild here.
And
But
so,
killing people isn't cruel and unusual,
right,
you know?
and basically saying I'm going to get the same sentence if I kill one person as I kill three. So that whole idea, look, I'm a marketing and business guy. I'm not a lawyer, but the lawyers in our caucus, and we got some good ones like Larry Brock and Frank Caputo and these guys. They're saying this is just crazy. They were Crown prosecutors, and they feel frustrated having gone after Hell's Angels guys and all of this stuff, and saying, how come we can't get a proper sentence for somebody who is a career criminal, violent criminal, who's done multiple murders, and still the court says, oh, well, we need to be kind to him somehow. We don't think, and I certainly don't think we need to be kind to multiple murderers.
I totally agree.
Yeah, and like kind of going back to multiple murderers, like we've seen a lot of rhetoric on the global scale right now with Trump, having issue with China lately, right? Don't worry, I'm not going to mention the 51st state yet, but but there is kind of the questions like, he's had serious issues with China, he's has issues with our Arctic and our border security, as we talked about. Do we have any appetite in our Conservative caucus, or in the Conservative caucus, about taking more of a targeted approach towards China and being a little more serious and tough versus what they're doing, especially how they're peddling drugs into our country and then working it down to the States?
Oh, look, 100%. My 2.5 years on the industry committee, every piece of legislation, I've been targeting China. China is, there was, I call it the Clinton doctrine. They were brought into the World Trade Organization and Gambit on the belief during the Clinton era that we would, by opening them up to trade and business, that would open up their democratic processes. All it did was open up the fact that we're a bunch of fools in the West, and they took advantage of everything from our economics to our open borders to put forward their long-term agenda, which is to destabilize Western democracies and control them either through economics or other means. China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran are the four countries that are driving the instability in the world. They're the new alliance that is trying to undermine the West. Everything from paying $10 million for a $2 million lobster buying business in Nova Scotia to bringing in fentanyl precursors into our borders to dumping steel into Canada and tires that go into the U.S. They are, make no mistake what China, who is the leader of this, they do not like the West. They want us to go away. And so we have operated since World War II under a World War II alliance of Europe and North America. But I think, what our greatest harm right now is in North America is our Arctic. We have Russia, who has reopened almost 24 Soviet Union military bases in the north. Mm-hmm. We have China, who has armed polar class 1 icebreakers, more than we have in Canada, actually 4 times more than we have in Canada. They're not an Arctic nation. Those icebreakers are in our north. This is what we need to be worried about. We've got a Western hemispheric security challenge, and we've allowed it both economically, and we've allowed it from a national security perspective by taking our north for granted. So Pierre has announced part 1 of our Arctic strategy, should we get in, which includes a base in Iqaluit, which would be able to service and where we would base the F-35 fighter aircraft, but also would be a fueling station and a base for our Navy. We have the new Arctic offshore patrol vessels that are built here in Halifax. We have new destroyers coming online. They need the north. There will be a second part to Pierre's and our announcement on the north. That's just the first part. We need to be a partner with the United States. We have NORAD, but we have the Northern Early Warning System, which is being redone. We have to be aware that the Arctic is our exposed area for entry into the United States for Canada and the United States enemies. And it's our responsibility to look after it as Canada because it's our country and our border. And China is and will continue to be a target. A lot of what you're seeing in the US and the security issues and what President Trump is doing is really around the issue of China's influence in the world. Yeah. Their influence around the Panama Canal, their influence through our north, their influence of our economy. All of that has to be stopped because they are not our friends.